Here is a number that quietly decides whether your business grows or slowly bleeds out. And most people running a small subscription never look at it until it is already hurting them. You can pour money into ads, land a wave of new customers, feel like things are finally working, and still shrink because customers are leaving out the back door faster than you are bringing them in the front. That number is your churn rate. Today, I want to show you exactly what it is, how to measure it without fooling yourself, and the handful of things that actually move it. I run my own small businesses, and I compute this number for them every single month. I am not an academic, and I am not here to sell you a growth secret. I am the person who sits down with a spreadsheet, counts who left, and tries to understand why. So everything here is the plain version, the way I would explain it to a friend starting their first subscription product. And I will be honest about what this number can and cannot tell you, because a metric you trust blindly is worse than no metric at all. What churn rate actually is. Churn rate is the share of your customers who leave over a set period of time, usually a month. That is the whole idea. If you start the month with a group of paying customers and some of them cancel by the end of it, the percentage that walked away is your churn. People also call it attrition or logo churn when they are counting customers rather than dollars. But do not let the vocabulary scare you. It is just the leak rate of your bucket. Every subscription business is a bucket you are trying to fill, and churn is the size of the hole in the bottom. Compounding people versus counting money. There are two different things you can count when you measure churn, and mixing them up causes real confusion. The first is customer churn, sometimes called logo churn, which counts how many customers left. One customer leaving is one unit, whether they paid you $9 a month or $900. The second is revenue churn, which counts how much money left. Those two numbers can tell very different stories. You can lose a pile of tiny customers and barely feel it in revenue, or lose one big account and take a real hit while your customer count still looks fine. You want to watch both because each one hides something the other reveals. A good habit is to write both numbers down side by side every single month, because the day they start to disagree with each other is usually the day something worth understanding is happening under the surface of your business. How to calculate it? Let me make this concrete with round numbers, and please treat these as an example, not a benchmark for your business. Say you start the month with 200 customers. Over the month, 10 of them cancel. Your customer churn rate is 10 divided by 200, which is 5% for that month. That is it. The formula is customers lost during the period, divided by the customers you had at the start of the period. The one rule that trips people up is what goes on the bottom. You divide by the customers you started with, not the number you ended with. And you generally do not count brand new customers who joined and left inside the same month because they muddy the picture. Keep the window fixed and keep the starting count honest. Now do the same thing with money. Say each of those 200 customers pays you $30 a month. So you began with $6,000 of monthly recurring revenue, which everyone shortens to MR. The 10 customers who left were paying $30 each, so you lost $300. Your revenue churn is 300 divided by 6,000, which is again 5%. In this tidy example, the two numbers match, but in real life, they rarely do, because your customers do not all pay the same amount. And that gap between customer churn and revenue churn is where the interesting story lives. What counts as a good number? The question everyone asks next is what counts as a good churn rate? And the honest answer is that it depends, more than anyone selling you a benchmark wants to admit. A monthly churn of 5% might be perfectly healthy for a cheap product aimed at consumers who naturally come and go, and alarming for an expensive tool sold to businesses that signed annual contracts. The price point matters, the type of customer matters, and the length of the commitment matters. A business selling to other businesses usually expects lower churn than one selling to individuals because companies switch tools slowly. So rather than chase someone else's figure, I would watch my own trend. Is this month better or worse than last month? That comparison is honest. A benchmark from a company that looks nothing like yours is close to useless. Why small churn still matters? Here is why even a small churn number deserves respect. Churn compounds quietly month after month. If you lose 5% of your customers every month and add nobody new, you are not down 5% at the end of the year, you are down closer to half, because each month takes its cut of a slightly smaller group. The flip side is the encouraging part. Shaving even a point or two of your monthly churn changes the shape of the whole business over a year, because you keep more of what you already worked so hard to win. Retention is not a boring defensive metric. It is quietly one of the most powerful growth levers you have. Gross versus net revenue churn. Now the piece that confuses the most people and the one worth slowing down for. There are two ways to measure revenue churn, gross and net, and they answer different questions. Gross revenue churn counts only the money you lost from cancellations and downgrades. It can never be better than zero because it ignores any good news. Net revenue churn takes that lost money and then adds back the extra revenue you gained from existing customers who upgraded or bought more. That second number can actually go negative in a good way. Let me show you why that matters. Say in a month, you lost $300 from customers who left, but existing customers who stayed upgraded their plans and gave you an extra $500. Your gross revenue churn still shows the $300 you lost, but your net revenue churn is a gain of $200, which shows up as a negative churn rate. A business with negative net revenue churn grows from its existing customers alone before it signs a single new one. That is a genuinely strong position, and it is completely invisible if you only ever look at the gross number or at customer churn, the levers that actually reduce it. So what actually moves this number? In my experience, it is rarely one clever trick and usually a few unglamorous things done consistently. The first is onboarding. Most customers who leave decide to leave in the first few days before they ever felt the product work for them. So getting someone to their first real win quickly matters more than almost anything you can do later. The second is simply paying attention to the customers who are drifting away, the ones whose usage is quietly falling, and reaching out while they are still around rather than after they cancel. The third lever is fixing the reasons people give when they leave. If you actually ask departing customers why, in a short, honest survey, patterns show up fast. Maybe they never got value. Maybe the price stopped making sense. Maybe one missing feature was the deal breaker. You cannot fix what you refuse to look at. And the fourth, the quiet one, is failed payments. A real share of churn in subscription businesses is not a decision at all. It is a card that expired and a payment that silently failed. Chasing those down gently recovers customers who never actually wanted to leave. That is often the cheapest churn you will ever save. People sometimes split churn into two kinds for exactly this reason. Voluntary churn is the customer choosing to walk away, and involuntary churn is the payment quietly failing on its own. The two need completely different fixes, so it helps to know which one you are actually looking at before you spend a week solving the wrong problem. Sichi Compensum. The mistakes to avoid. Let me warn you about the mistakes I see most, because measuring churn badly is worse than not measuring it. The first is changing your definition from 1 month to the next, so your numbers are not comparable and you cannot tell a real trend from a counting change. Pick one definition and hold it. The second is only counting customer churn while ignoring revenue, which hides the difference between losing your smallest accounts and losing your biggest. The third is celebrating a low churn number that is only low because your business is young and your oldest customers have not reached their renewal decision yet. Give it time before you trust it. What the number cannot tell you. And here is the honest limit on the whole thing. Churn rate tells you how many are leaving. It does not tell you why, and it never will on its own. The number is a smoke alarm, not a diagnosis. When it climbs, it is telling you to go and look, to talk to the people who left, to read the cancellation reasons, to check whether a recent change drove them off. Treat the metric as the start of a question, not the answer. And never treat any single number as a verdict on your whole business, because a real business is always more complicated than one percentage. A word for the smallest operators. One more piece of honesty, especially for the smallest operators. If you only have a few dozen customers, a single cancellation swings your churn rate wildly, and one bad month is not automatically a trend. With small numbers, I look at longer windows, maybe a quarter instead of a single month. So one person leaving does not send me into a panic, and one quiet month does not lull me into thinking I solved it. The smaller you are, the more you should trust the direction over many months and distrust any single month's figure. Where to go from here? If this made churn feel less like a mystery and more like something you can actually measure and work on, that is exactly what I am going for. Every one of these explainers lives in writing at dataresearchanalysiscollection.com, the whole metric library in plain English, so you can read this one again slowly with your own numbers in front of you, or pick up the next metric when you are ready. No hype, no promises about your results, just the numbers explained clearly so you can make your own call. For shitty recap, churn rate is the share of customers or revenue you lose over a period. Count both the customers and the dollars because they tell different stories. Learn the difference between gross and net revenue churn because net can go negative and that is the strong position to be in. Reduce it with better onboarding, early attention to drifting customers, honest exit surveys, and by catching failed payments before they cost you. And remember that the number tells you people are leaving, never on its own why. Watch your own trend. Be patient with small numbers and let the metric send you toward the real question. I will see you in the next one.